Hello again. This is Stones of Creation. And let us talk today about the spirits. There are several types. There are elder spirits, those that came into the new world, into Nulk from Kalm. These spirits do not have physical representations in the real world. Rather, they represent more abstract ideals that may have once been physical objects and things in Kalm, but are now mutated and altered by the changes of reality itself that makes up Nulk. So they'll represent things like death, love, fear, dreams, but they'll never represent something like a mountain or a tree, because they don't reflect like the world spirits do. And then the world spirits, you have the grand spirits of the world and minor spirits of the world. Grand spirits of the world represent things like the sun, the moon, one of the moons, each star has a grand spirit associated with it. The world itself, the sky, things like that. Massive, broad physical things. The seas, mountains. Mountains as an idea, like all mountains. They are incredibly, ignore mountains. No, not mountains. But the earth, the sea, the clouds, the sun, the moons, the stars, all these things are represented by the grand spirits. Individual things like mountains, like a mountain or a specific river or a lake or some plains, all are represented by minor spirits of the world. And then we have the somewhat odd spirits. We have the inanimate and souled. The inanimate and souled represent things that are not animate in the real sense. Things like trees, all form of plants, bugs, individual fires, things that are alive but not active. They can't behave other than how they are. Those things that have very simple concepts and thought processes and cannot be more complicated than food, collect, gather. Jellyfish would fall into this categories. Clouds, because weirdness, clouds and fire, and they all represent individuals, making them more akin to the lesser spirits than the grand spirits. They don't represent massive, all-spanning things, but individual little living things. And then you have more proper souls. These souls are people, though no humans are present, so people. Looks like this cube. And animals of whatever variety there is. Most fish, things with more complicated minds and concepts and abilities to remember, respond, to develop personality. They have their own consciousness. They'll have this type of free soul. As limited souls are things. Now, each one of these have different abilities. All up until here have the ability to interact with the spirit world primarily. Here is limited, primarily acts with the physical world. And there is one last type of spirit. Elder Remainers. Those that did not enter Nulk. Those that are still left in Calm, or who made their own realm that is not Nulk. These things don't have active presence in the spirit world, because they're not part of Nulk's spirit world. Though they have very little presence in Nulk's physical world, because they're not present there either. Rather, their effects in the world is usually seen through tertiary events, things that have interacted with them, then interacting with the world, rather than them interacting with the world. They can't. For them to enter Nulk would be to them to submit themselves to the Elder Spirits' guidelines, those structures that make up Nulk, and those that remain in Calm do not want to abandon their being. That is why they either made their own realm or did not come to Nulk with the First Covenant. This leads to them being of interesting consideration to those things that are left in Nulk. For the beings of Nulk, they are left with the danger that it's possible that something bad could happen and a spirit could die. What happens to a tree when something kills its ensouled? Well, this is where things get interesting. Ensouls can become more proper souls, more proper lesser spirits over time by more interesting means. They'll inhabit if the tree was to die and someone was to take that lumber and make a chair, the spirit of the tree would not be entirely gone, though all but the most powerful spirits would be fractured. And these lesser things, these fragmented spirits, initially are just emanations and wisps, memories of the original. But given time and a stable existence, it's possible for one of these to grow into something new. This does mean that anything that's crafted from living materials will have an ensouled thing. Though, interestingly enough, it is possible to get a half-ensouled thing that is both ensouled and proper spirit if the structure is made from a mixture of broken non-materials and living materials. Though it is of course, this leads to the question of the other side. What happens when the spirit dies, but the body has not? When the spirit dies, the body no longer has a consciousness for something that is currently what we would recognize as alive. This would be representing in a mix of it rapidly dying and rapidly growing. It would become uncontrolled, unbound by nature's and probability and proper behaviors. It would start turning all that it could into energy and growth and trying is a strong word because there's no will anymore. The will died with the spirit. Rather, this creature that has remained, this empty, to avoid the word hollow, simply because it is rather well known in popular culture for similar things. These things that are left without a soul are broken, cancerous creatures that act not even on instinct, but purely survival, with no conscious thought beyond actively stating all its needs simultaneously. No longer does it have a tree's willingness to lose leaves for the winter. It will just keep growing, putting out new leaves, trying to gather as many bits of sunlight as possible, even if that means that it's killing itself, that it's using too much energy to gather each bit. It will just keep growing until it dies. And if conditions are favorable enough for it to not die, it will become a mass, a tumorous echo of whatever it once was. For things that are not alive, though, we get something slightly different in a way. If you were never alive to begin with, you wouldn't start growing. Let us talk about a mountain. When the spirit of the mountain dies, it is killed through the hoarded needs necessary to destroy a spirit. Souls are slightly more fragile, naturally, because of their stronger connection to the physical world than spirits. The area becomes an echo of its former self. The material less strong, the area less active, breaking down and wearing away with time as other spirits move in. The spirit of water washing away the dry, decaying mountain. Souls of trees and forests, creating that breakdown necessary for a plain spirit nearby to move in. All these other spirits will start coming in and replacing the dead area. And so an entire mountain may crumble to dust. Though it is very hard to kill a spirit, even if when spirits clash with each other. Usually these are simply attempts to overwhelm each other and to make the other submit. They can't be killed in the conventional sense without great and horrible effort. Say less about the elder spirits and the grand spirits. Both of they are so mighty in their structure and being that to kill them would be a feat unheard of. Now, with the proper... In the spirit world, spirits don't need to maintain the proximity to their being beyond the most abstract in senses. They'll occasionally have to return to prevent it from becoming echoed. And when they become echoed in that way, where the spirit and the structure both existed, it is possible for them to reunify, but depending on the remaining structure, a broken, worn-away mountain, a cancerous growth that has consumed all the neighboring trees, it may not be desirable for the spirit to return to it. Now, this leads to the interesting question about fully ensouled things. And they become static when their spirit dies. If someone was to find and kill you, if someone was to go in, pull out your soul in the spirit world, and then kill it, you would shut down. Not your body would live, but it would start to grow out of control. This uncontrollable decay into many possible things. In the same way that tide-souled entities will, though you will completely stop your motion, as animus is a property of the soul, not of the body. Consciousness and conscious thought also ends as the soul ends. And then the question is, what happens to these things when the body dies? Well, the soul is completely freed. It is separated. It does not fracture like encapsulated souls do. That is what makes these two types of souls different. Upon the death of the body, the soul becomes free and will simply wander the spirit realm. They'll gather in places based on other spirits' desires, as well as the actions of previous souls. This creates a complicated afterlife where these ghosts will have less effect based on their previous life and more on how they treated the spirits. How spirits local to them care. Though it is possible for a ghost to travel a long distance from their body in order to find a more hospitable place to rest in the afterlife. Though most spirits, grand, lesser, and great, do judge souls that do this. Though a clever soul might be able to weave a tale that explains why one would travel so far. Maybe they were an adventurer and they've been traveling for many years, and it is only now that they grow weary in their afterlife and wish to settle down. Maybe their local spirits are rather unkind, but for no fault of its own. A local soul who had died before, in a justified means, is now telling the spirits that they were a terrible person in life. And this does ignore one exception. Inheritance. One of the forms of magic does use the ensouled beings, the living soul, specifically. The living creature, again a cube simply because it is the easiest to use, will inherit, through a ritual and a process, the soul of its master, who had inherited the soul of their previous master, and the soul of their previous master. And upon their death, these souls will also be inherited, creating a conglomeration that advises the next soul, carrying memories of magic forward. These souls are separated from the normal cycle of life and death, though they are not the only things. Magic in general may be able to force a soul to not leave, creating the undead, or capturing a soul after its death to keep it alive. Artificing uses the splinters of souls from things that were alive, or the splinters of spirits from things that were massive and then dead, though the spirit splinters are a lot less prominent than soul splinters, simply because spirits don't die when their connected structure dies. I do not believe I talked about what happens to a spirit when its connected structure dies, though I might have. They are free to wander, though they do leave fragments. Well, these fragments are much lesser than the soul fragments of things, especially soul fragments of powerful creatures. Living people also leave soul fragments upon their death, though these again are weaker than those of encapsulated souls. And finally, it is possible, using horrid magics and similar, to separate a spirit or a soul from its connection, though this is only for the weaker spirits. The grand spirits and elder spirits are beyond the touch of most mortal powers. The necessary control and diligence to do so is unheard of, though perhaps not necessarily impossible. This has been Spirits and Souls within the Creation Stones of Creation. I have been your host. Have a very nice day.